Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
All right, so pretty slow weekend for news. Not a lot going on. I was kind of chilling. I was thinking, what should I talk about on a pod? It's been a couple days. I wanted to take a couple days break in the start of the new year. And yeah, there's not a lot to talk about, you know, just the continuation of the war machine. Nothing new, really. But in all seriousness, the major operation that was carried out by the United States to arrest Nicolas Maduro, brief attack that took place on Venezuela, that is now going to lead to, no doubt, an endless, prolonged political and possibly military engagement with Venezuela, where we try to dictate, no pun intended, what their politics are going to be and are going to look like. It's the weekend, so a lot of the discourse that is going to happen and come out surrounding all of this hasn't quite happened yet. And what I've been wondering about since this happened is, what are we going to hear from the so-called anti-war side of the right? Because they did make some noise when Trump bombed Iran suddenly at the behest of Israel. However, there's been multiple military engagements other than that they haven't had as much of a problem with. And it seems to me that the anti-war backlash died down a lot quicker within the ranks of Trump support than the Epstein file stuff. People seemed upset about the war stuff at first, but they kind of gave up. And the reason is because there's this vast power infrastructure that's behind what Trump did in Iran and what he's doing in Venezuela. And so once people see that that's on the rails, it seems kind of impossible to do anything about. We've seen this happen over and over again, and it's this overwhelming show of force, and now Trump is unleashing that even more. So I do think there's a sense of disillusionment that comes when you specifically vote for somebody like Barack Obama, like Donald Trump, who said that they were the anti-war candidate, and then see them continue to carry out the whims of the war machine. And I don't mean to exactly compare those two. Obviously what we're seeing now is a little different from what we've seen in the recent past when it comes to American policy. But at the same time, it's the same principle, right? Where no matter how anti-war you run a campaign as, it just seems impossible to actually follow that through. And then if you're a madman like Trump, you're going to take any opportunity to go to war, to show force. And so I think this is a combination of the people around Trump that are, whispering in his ear and creating this narrative, this justification for war that was already there, by the way. This is not new because of Trump. This is an existing justification for war with Venezuela, but Trump is the type of president that's willing to carry it out in this way, whereas it's likely that Obama or Biden would not have done this and didn't. But at the same time, this conflict with Venezuela had been brewing throughout all of the last several presidencies, especially starting with Trump's first one and then Biden's as well. So is the anti-war right going to have much to say about this? So far, they haven't. That's not the people that we have been hearing from so far. That's probably going to change as of today. You're probably going to see more people go out on their podcasts and, begin their week and speak about this. And so now the discourse is really going to get discoursing, which is why they did this on a Saturday night, because they wanted, Fox News and the fast acting propaganda outlets to be able to get in first on this. So that's exactly what happened. Fox News immediately was doing interviews with Trump where he essentially admitted to these war crimes. Marco Rubio has been all over the news doing a blast of pretty dodgy interviews about this. Pete Hegseth also a little bit. Trump has talked to the press a lot. He loves this. He was apparently answering the phone immediately after this happened, like that night, moments after the strike. A New York Times reporter called him and he answered without knowing who it was. So that's the story, at least. So this is a big moment for the Trump administration, and the only people that can cause a change in this policy is people within the Republican Party and on the right. And I think there's a step beyond that where it turns into a broader societal backlash. But still, that societal backlash isn't going to make much of a dent in this particular administration unless it also includes their support base. And so I think there's going to be a fair amount of that. Probably some of the loudest voices are going to be opposed to this in some way. But I think the difference when it comes to this versus Israel and Iran is that there's this sort of existing resentment when it comes to Israel, whether it's for valid political reasons or, underlying anti-Semitic reasons. There exists that sense that Israel should not be calling the shots for America. So when America does a bombing in Iran, that caused people to feel like, Trump was not in control and he was taking orders from Benjamin Netanyahu, apparently. And that's one of the strongest marks against Trump, even in his far right base, is people feeling like he's essentially just a cuck to Israel like any other American leader. But in the case of Venezuela, I think a lot of even our anti-war friends are going to be a lot more open to this idea of, going in and removing Maduro and taking as much of the oil as we can, because we cannot allow a communist or a pseudo-communist or whatever you would consider Maduro to be, anything other than a capitalist, to control that amount of oil. That is going to make sense to your average libertarian. And also I think, frankly, the lawlessness of this, the fact that because America has the ability to do this, it's the right thing to do. And so to the extent that we have seen commentary from people in the various eclectic positions on the right, that's the kind of thing that they've been saying, that this is ultimately a good thing, or that it's good in the name of capital, or that, people shouldn't be defending a dictator like Maduro. And obviously that's not what this is about. And everybody who is speaking favorably about this knows that, because they would easily use this as political ammo for any other leader who did this same thing. And so what Trump is doing that another American leader would not do is he's doing this seemingly for no reason and not bothering to create any actual justification. And in a sense, that could work based on how fast this was carried out. Because they did this so quickly, it's very likely, like let's say they did this and then it goes away completely, right? They try Maduro, whatever happens with that, it doesn't turn into a conflict in the world at large. The right is going to go just right back to supporting him. They're not going to see any issue with this at all. Principally, there's no issue here. But if it goes on to be some kind of prolonged disaster and there's collapse in Venezuela and they fail to prop up the government, Trump has already casted doubt on the idea that their favored opposition to Maduro in Venezuela, this Machado character who won the Peace Prize and then dedicated it to Trump. Apparently Trump is not so hot on her anymore. I thought that she had a good relationship with the president. What that seems like to me is that now that they've done this, all the cards are in Trump's hand. He has 100% of control of this situation and calls the shots. And so now he's saying, well, I don't have to do anything for you. What have you done for me lately? And some people are saying that there's resentment over the fact that he didn't win the Peace Prize. I don't know, maybe so. But they're leaving the vice president of Venezuela, the existing vice president under Maduro, in charge. And so now they're exchanging threats. She is now saying we're not going to back down. The Venezuelan people should take to the streets. We need, our president back immediately. But Trump has said that they're going to cooperate, that she's going to cooperate, and that's why she's being left in place. Now, since he initially said that, I believe that is when she made her statements, tough talking a little bit, and Trump then spoke a little bit more harshly, saying that she might get a worse fate than Maduro, etc. So if this turns into a prolonged disaster, that is probably when the anti-war right, or even just, regular people who are more right-leaning, are going to start piping up about this and realizing that this was a dupe, right? That we've been launched into the same type of war that we've been in, that we've been told was politically bad and unacceptable for the last few decades. And here we are again. And this was specifically a guy who said that he wasn't going to do this. So the promise of Trump now hinges on if he can do the second part better than anybody else has. The answer to that is obviously no. But they're going to try, and that is ultimately what the people who are still supporting him are going to be depending on, is well, Trump he behaves differently than other presidents. And so when he goes about this regime change, it's going to be smooth, it's going to be perfect, it's going to be beautiful. Leaving that government in place and not trying to replace it with some shill government might actually be the smartest move when it comes to retaining stability there. But Trump is saying that he wants to send in the oil companies, and that's essentially what this is about, that they are going to start to take control of the oil situation. Trump says, we're going to run Venezuela and we are going to take as much oil as we want. He basically said that it's stolen oil. This is oil from the ground in Venezuela that Donald Trump says that is stolen from us. And basically this is all just about the oil companies that want access to that and him carrying out their interests, which he has said. He said he spoke to them about this. He didn't even notify Congress of this, and yet he notified the oil companies that are going to be going in and extracting that oil. So that is what this is about. It's blatant, and that is where Trump differs from other presidents, is he's not even pretending that this is about something other than that. And I'm not sure how that's going to end up going. That's why I'm wondering what we're going to hear from the right about this, because this is a genuine conflict for them, because they are excited by the idea not only of Trump's, doing this madman machismo thing and going and kidnapping anybody we want and doing it in this sort of spectacular fashion. They love that. And they're also sympathetic to this idea of financial interest in oil. So even to the extent that they're skeptical of that, and they're skeptical of, billionaires owning all the oil and blah, 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 they have no critique of fossil fuels or the general economy of the world running on oil and how unsustainable that is, as well as the fact that expeditions like this are because of how unsustainable oil is as a resource. We have to continue doing increasingly draconian things like this because oil is a finite resource. So to me, that's going to make them more susceptible to ultimately the argument that this has to be done. And that's the argument that they're going to try it out. They're already trotting it out. And I think a lot of people, even if they make noise about it on the front end, are going to go with that. So I think the question at that point becomes, how effective can the agitation be? Because if there's agitation, not just seemingly coming from the left, but from people in general, and now you see some agitation happening in Venezuela by the current sitting president, and also under the direction of Maduro himself before he was removed by the United States, he was telling people to hit the street. So now they're doing that, and we're starting to see the ripples of that in Venezuela's populace. And the plan, when Maduro was in power, what he said was going to happen is that people should strike, that there should be a general strike in Venezuela to protect their oil. So that very well could happen, but now it's on the leadership of that country to decide if they're really going to go down that path. Because this is not, the people of Venezuela deciding to strike without the permission of the government, although I suppose that could happen. This is the government of Venezuela saying the people should strike. And the current president has said some things like that, but not quite as strongly as Maduro did. So the amount of unrest that takes place in Venezuela, I think, is going to determine how smoothly this goes from here, or it's going to be one of the major factors, right? If this leads to a huge amount of backlash from Venezuela, that's pretty much instantly going to turn into a situation that the United States simply can't control. There's literally nothing that they could do at that point to stabilize the situation. But like I said, Trump has signaled that at least at first, this vice president was willing to cooperate in a sense that for some reason made them feel more comfortable leaving her in place. So that is where I wonder, frankly. I also wonder if they were to mount a general strike, how exactly is that going to affect this situation? When we're talking about, American oil companies going into Venezuela and setting up the infrastructure, that's not a simple thing. This is a different type of oil than a lot of the reserves that we work with in different places in the world. So it's going to take a long time. We don't have the infrastructure for it. So, a general strike or lots of people being in the streets now or a couple days is different from the type of sustained effort that's going to be needed to slow that down. And if that were to happen, if they were over a long period of time to strike in a way that prevents the United States from going in, that would really put the clamps on this plan. It would be hard for them to handle that. It would probably lead to outright military strikes and murder of civilians in Venezuela on the part of the United States. That's probably what would happen if things go in that direction. It's hard for me to imagine that the current government is going to go in that direction because they're probably scared. This probably freaked them out, and Trump is being very clear that they have no problem doing this again. He's also saying that about Cuba. This long list of countries that they've said they want to go after, Colombia as well as Greenland. So he's still signaling that he wants to go and do this in Greenland. And now you see even EU politicians are afraid to say that he shouldn't do that and to come out strongly against it. So that means that Trump might be allowed to do that. And it's unclear what would happen if a NATO country attacked another NATO country. But because it's the United States, probably nothing would happen and they would be allowed to do it. So, in other words, the backlash to this needs to happen now. We don't have the time. It's good that this wasn't as deadly of an operation as it could have been. And I do not want United States acting as the world police, especially not with Donald Trump at the crest of it. It just makes absolutely no sense. The guy's such a blatant criminal. He should not be enforcing the law on any other world leader, obviously. But Trump is being very clear that he wants to use the military's might in order to carry out these swift actions on the part of the United States, and whatever these interests of his that he has decided are the most immediate priorities. And he probably can get away with doing a lot of that. They could definitely do this in Cuba. They could definitely do this in Colombia. And so in the meantime, as they're trying to prepare to do that, there needs to be an enormous amount of backlash to this in Venezuela, and also here. It's definitely here, because even if Venezuela goes and strikes and does everything, the real people who can put a stop to this are Americans. And we, as the left, are in a tricky position because anything anti-war that's coming from us is going to be falling on deaf ears. So it means we still have to show up. We cannot abdicate this because this is what we do as the left. We show up against war every time. There are some elements of the right that are a little bit more sympathetic to that. And probably now is the time to try to stoke resistance through those people as much as possible. And we'll see. We are going to see in the next couple days how much of an appetite those people have to actually oppose this and oppose the war machine under Trump. And there are going to be some of them that do. How many of the ones like Tim Dillon or even Joe Rogan that are going to speak to their audience and get drowned out? They're going to get beaten down by the fact that their audience wants this, and so they're not going to go against it. In the case of people like Tim Dillon and Joe Rogan, I think that's probably what is going to happen, or at least it's one of the likely options. Tim Dillon is somebody that I think is more likely to have a strong opposition to this because that has been his pattern in the past. And the only reason I invoke those names specifically is because I think they are the ones who can particularly have an impact on this. And we shouldn't depend on them, but we should keep an eye on which are the ones that are willing to talk about this and then try to harmonize there. Because whatever the message is that is going to get the maximum amount of people in Trump's base upset about this, that can also translate across the board. That's going to be the message that can coalesce into meaningful resistance and not just something that is cast as, left-wing liberals being whiny, right? We need to capitalize on whatever the aspect of this that upsets the average American the most. And we don't exactly know what that is going to be yet, but another thing that I would say is this is an opportunity to talk to that average American about how fossil fuels is at the core of all of these world issues and could be eschewed as the fuel, no pun intended, for those issues. So we haven't had great opportunities to talk about that with people over the last several years. And so now they're putting that back on the forefront of the public conversation. So that's about the best I can do for a bright side on this one.
Me too close to, too much to do. The mission is too crucial. Shout it out from the rooftops until I lose vocals. Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity.